Welcome back to Breaking Bowling. Today, we are going to talk about Joe Bell. And if you haven't seen that movie, I will look it up. I highly recommend it. But we'll get into it after I hit this music. Joining me this week is professional comedian Jio Jiovani. Gio, thank you for coming on today.
Oh man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, when you contacted me a few months ago, I had to look up that movie, Joe Bell, which, if you're a big Mark Wahlberg fan, even more reasons why to watch it. But that story, holy crap. Uh,
Right,
I don't want to give too much away. Well, I guess you could Google Joel Bell, find out. Talk about a setback of losing your child and then a setback to Joe after trying
correct.
to accomplish his mission. So if you haven't seen the movie Joe Bell, you're probably going to get a lot of spoilers. Um, can't help it.
Can't
So,
help it. Yeah, exactly. Fair warning.
so Gio, let's get started. How did you meet Joe Bell?
I had a mutual friend who uh, the son that committed that basically took his own life was her nephew, and
Okay.
she contacted me to tell me the whole story about it, and about how Caden and the bullying that took place at the school, and the entire story basically the movie covers at the beginning. And she asked if there's anything I could do to help, and I said absolutely. And so as a result of that, I ended up getting to meet Joe. We became very good friends. And I did some shows for him to help raise money for the cause and also to continue his walk.
I'm also going to give you another spoiler here if you haven't seen the movie Joe Bell. Joe Bell had a son who was gay. When the kids in his high school found out he was gay, he endured ruthless bullying. And there's even a scene in the movie where they sit down, I believe it's a principal's or counselor's office,
Yep.
and they're trying to plead their case, like, please make this bullying stop. And the school just brushed it off, like, well,
Yeah.
maybe, it's maybe you should go do this. Or I can't remember. They kind of just put it back on to his son, Jaden. And
Right.
I guarantee you, if you watch that scene, if you have a child being bullied, what they showed in the movie is pretty much how every kid in America has probably experienced the same thing when they go to the principal's office, try to complain about school bullying, and the school just brushes it off, puts it
Yep.
back on the kid. So,
Yep.
in turn, when Joe son committed suicide, Joe Bell decided to spread his message of bullying, to talk about, we have more empathy, tolerance on things. And I guess that's the point where you finally met Joe Bell. What was he like when he started his walk?
He, first of all, the reason he decided to walk is, and this is a funny story, is after his son passed, he just started pacing and he couldn't stop pacing and he couldn't stop. He just walked and walked. And he decided, you know what? I'm going to walk and spread this message across the country to anyone that will listen, churches, schools, whatever. And he showed me his path. And after Colorado, he was going to start heading south into Texas. And this was getting about wintertime. He was going to go through Florida and then up the East Coast. And I said, oh, that's smart. You know, you'll be down in the South when it's cold. And he just smiled at me and he goes, that's not why I'm going south. I said, why are you going south? He says, because when I get to Florida, I want to wrestle an alligator. That was his reasoning for going south. But he, it was said about him, and it's true because I also did a eulogy for him at his funeral, and he did not have acquaintances. He had friends. And if he liked you, that was the end of it. You were his friend, and he would do anything for you. He was an amazing guy, really was.
You met Joe Bell right after his son took his life, correct?
Just about a month and a half afterwards, after he had started his walk. For those that don't know, he started in Oregon, and I met him in Colorado. And if we picked him up, like if he stopped to talk to the different areas in the church and the schools, when we dropped him off, he didn't want any leeway. Like we offered to drop him off 5 miles away from where we picked him up. He's like, nope, take me to the exact spot you dropped me off at because I'm going to step and make every single step on this journey. And that was just how committed he was to this.
In the movie, they showed him reaching out to a few schools. How successful was he?
he was very successful. As a matter of fact, when he was here in Denver, he was only planning on staying for about 4 or 5 days. He ended up staying almost 10 days because he just got speaking engagement after speaking engagement and got to spread that word to people. And going back to make a point, what you said, when he did go in front of the principal, their attitude was like, oh, it's something kids do. They bully. And they brushed it off. And when they put it back in the parents' face, because Jaden was a cheerleader, he was very flamboyant. He was a very outwardly gay and proud of who he was. And so they were like, well, maybe he shouldn't be a cheerleader anymore because this was a small town in Oregon. That's how they put it back on on his plate, which is unfortunate that, like you said, kids still have to go through this in this day and age because bullying is not just something kids do. It has a lasting effect mentally and emotionally on kids. And it's something that needs to be addressed in this country. It really does, especially with the school shootings that we see and how many times we hear those people were bullied and they were tired of being bullied. It's a mental health issue and it's a crisis in this country.
What happened to those kids that were picking on Jaden after he committed suicide?
Nothing.
I was reading on some report that those kids that were picking on Jaden eventually just found a new target at school and picked on that person.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. Absolutely nothing happened to them whatsoever.
Do you by chance remember what the school's anti-bullying policy was at the time? Because I was reading that they did have one, but they didn't really follow it. Was there like a
I don't know, what it was exactly. All Joe told me was they had one, but it was very lax, and it was never enforced. Because the folks at home that are listening, you have to remember this is a small rural farming town, to where being gay was not heard of in a small rural town, and if you were, you were the target of the town. He had bottles thrown at him when he was walking home. He endured ruthless beatings to where he ended up in the hospital a few times. It was not just a simple bullying situation.
watching the movie towards the end of the movie. I can't remember if it's towards the end or the middle. I can't remember where they put it, but Jaden, as the movie showed it, Jaden sent a like kind of like a help me text to his friend. The movie shows where like she couldn't be with him at that time. It sounded like Jaden was trying to reach for some kind of help or support before he took his own life. Did Joe talking more about those messages or letters?
No, he what he did talk about was the fact that Jaden came to him when he was coming out as gay. And Joe just kind of smiled when he was telling me this. He said, we already knew, but he felt he had to tell us. And he said, he was my son. And he said, we did a lot of things together. They used to go to the movies together, and their favorite licorice was red vines. And whenever they would leave the rest of the red vines at the movie seat for the next person. It was kind of like their thing. But he didn't talk in depth about the letters or about the text or anything like that. And I didn't want to push him on that fact.
Yeah, very understandable. When they reached out to you, Gio, what was kind of your role to help Joe?
When they reached out to me, Caden had not passed yet. He was in ICU, and he was clinging to life. After they found him on the school grounds on the swing set, he had tried to hang himself. They said Joe had started this walk, and the name of his foundation was Walk for a Change. And they said, he's going to be coming through Denver. Is there anything you can do to help? And I said, absolutely. And so I contacted some venues and I set some shows up. And then I met Joe personally about 4 or 5 days before the show. We were together. I mean, we were inseparable. I gave him rides to the different events that he was doing, and we just became really good friends. And it was really a father just didn't know what to do, and he was doing anything he could feel to try and make a difference.
When he went to these events, what was his like main message he would try to push towards kids? Was it mostly kids at these events, or was it like
Yeah,
adults or mixed?
it was mainly kids. And
Okay.
he would tell the story of what happened with Jaden. He would tell the story of what he endured. And then he would ask the group of kids, he said, who in here feels like you are being bullied, at the school? And those kids would raise their hands, and he would say, look around, you're not alone. And then he would ask some of the kids, have you ever been guilty of bullying? And some of them surprisingly did raise their hands. And he tried to make the impression of how it's not something that just has no victims, has no effect. It's not just harmless, busting balls, if you will. It's something that's very serious and goes deeper than that. And he tried to make him understand that. And then afterwards, the ones that did feel like they had been bullied, he met with after that and kind of gave them all individual talks about how they were amazing kids and how brave they were for raising their hands. And he also helped bring awareness to the school that this was a problem in their school when they didn't know it was.
Did the schools make changes right away to their policies?
There were not immediately, but since then, the Denver School Board has put into place anti-bullying measures to where they have a zero tolerance for it now. So if someone goes to an administrator or to a teacher, there is action taken as far as anything from suspension to expulsion, depending on how long it's been going on and what happened.
Since Joe Bell's passing, and I read that he did start like he had like a foundation started up. Is that
Mhm.
foundation still going on today? What's
There's offshoots of that foundation.
okay?
He was the backbone of that foundation. There were people in Salt Lake City who kind of took his message and ran with it. As far as walking or a walk for a cause, I don't believe it's around anymore,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Have you done anything yourself personally to help spread the message of bullying of the
I
harms of
have.
bullying?
I've gone after that movie came out, especially when it was in the media's eye. I've done media interviews. I've also gone to schools and talked to schools about it. I've done as much as I can. I wish I could do more. Without Joe, I'm kind of lost.
Yeah. Did you help book those schools for Joe as well, or did he find those? Did they come to him?
They came to him once they knew he
Okay.
was in town, and they also came to other organizations who were spreading Joe's word and letting people know that Joe was in town. So he would do churches, and then a lot of times what he would do is on his walk, he would spot a church or he'd spot a big school, and he'd go in on his own, and he would say, "Hey, look, this is my name. This is what I'm doing. Can I have some time at an assembly or something?" And a lot of times the school would give him that time to speak to the students and address them.
Okay. Because right now, for myself, I find speaking on the issue of bullying, especially with schools, they kind of just
It
tend to
it
like let's not get into that. Let's move on.
Sure. And I think part of that is the political aspect of it. I think a lot of that has to do with it. But to me, with the school shootings and how many of them you hear the parents say he was bullied in school and this happened to him and kids picked on him, you would think that more schools would want to talk about that out in the open. I'm actually kicking off a U.S. tour October 30th. It kicks off in Las Vegas, and I am donating 100% of the proceeds to mental health and addiction recovery centers in whatever city I happen to be in that time. Because I think when it comes to mental health and it comes to bullying, there's a stigma attached to that. The victims of bullying are afraid to say anything because they're afraid they're going to get it worse, or they're going to be called a baby, or they're going to, there's so many different things.
Yeah.
And then the mental health aspect, people are afraid to ask for help for mental health issues because they're afraid of being labeled crazy, or they're afraid that someone's just going to, like you were mentioning earlier, push it back on them, that why don't you just toughen up, why don't you just do this, and that's not what we need right now.
Yeah. I feel like I do feel like schools are getting better with the mental health. I know in my district, they hired up counselors, support staff. I do know that our community's got a lot of like support staff around mental health, and especially it seems like for that suicide prevention. And my biggest issue is that that's great. We have that in place. It's like a barrier. I talked about this last week in my podcast. We have a barrier for that point, but we need to put barriers up before kids even have that thought hit them in their head first. And
Right.
I feel like at least in my community, like we're just waiting a little bit too late. Oh, now we want to help this kid out. I guess that's just my personal thoughts, just from seeing how serious some of these like businesses or uh, schools take bullying seriously. Like, it's just kids being kids. And I understand with schools, a lot of it could be like a legal issue with them as well. If it's happening at their school, they're not doing nothing about it. They don't want to touch it because they don't want to be involved.
Right. Well, I think they're also afraid if they do address it and something does happen, they're going to get sued and people are going to come back and say, well, obviously you knew there was a problem because you tried to, correct it, but you didn't do it correctly. And so I think it's a double-edged sword for a lot of
Yeah.
school districts.
But do you think if they address a problem now before anything seriously happens and say we do have like right now, like my school's policies are not that clear. If you report bullying, they don't really tell you what's going to happen afterwards. Do you think if they would start taking action, like okay, if you report bullying, we're going to at least do this, this, and this, and this? You think that would help them out, or you think that's going to put them more into maybe some legal trouble if something does happen and policies weren't followed through?
Maybe if they have some sort of policy where, if it's not if there's no laws broken as far as if it's just verbal and it's not an actual physical assault on someone, that they have in there that the police won't be contacted, just the parents or whatever, that might help. But I agree with you. I think there has to be things in place beforehand before it even gets to that point. And they have to have like right now, the big thing is the trans kids and the LGBTQ community because they're making such a for lack of better words, explosive type. We're not going to take this type campaign anymore. So people are paying attention to them, whereas the regular everyday kids that are going through this kind of fall through the cracks. And I think that's where we need to do some sort of safety net. And I agree with you. Not only do you have to have the policy in place, but you have to follow that policy and you have to do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah. Did Joe Bell give out any advice on what he would want schools to do? Like, if he could, like, what was he looking for when him and his son met with the principal? Like, what did he want them to do at least?
He wanted the kids expelled.
Okay.
He wanted them expelled for what they had done because it was no longer just verbal. He would get notes in his locker that say, why don't you just kill yourself, you effing,
Yeah.
bag type stuff. He would literally have bottles thrown at him and he would come home with cuts, with bruises.
Being
He
insulted.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, he was being
Being
assaulted and
assaulted.
he was jumped a few times. I mean, it was it had gone beyond verbal. And they wanted the kids expelled and they wanted to get the police involved, but the school wouldn't, as you saw in the movie. That was a pretty good representation of what actually happened, but no one was going to touch it, not even the police.
Yeah. And it seems that's being true today. I had a guest on this podcast last year. Her son got jumped at a middle school, and the school district deleted the evidence of it happening. So when they went to go try to prosecute, the lawyer said, "Well, you don't have no proof that's your son being attacked." But luckily, one of the kids, did admit to attacking him. So I'm not sure what the update is on that situation. But that was another place where the school didn't want nothing to do with it. They deleted the video because they said it wasn't unclear, so they didn't see the
Right.
reason why to keep it. Um,
And you bring up a good point. Is a lot of times, I think what's happening with them is if you accuse someone, if you don't have any kind of proof, they have the benefit of the doubt of being
yeah,
innocent till proven guilty. So I think unless people actually have physical evidence, they're afraid to come forward and afraid to say something. And a lot of times it escalates to the point to where it does become a physical assault before anybody has any. I mean, we have cell phones everywhere. You can't do anything without being recorded anymore. But
yeah,
unfortunately, I think the kids will wait until it's a physical attack or a fight before they actually start recording something.
yeah. In this case, they wanted proof that that was his son being jumped. Like, so
Right,
it didn't matter what the kid said. Like, yeah, he attacked me, but where's the proof that that was you being attacked? It's like, come on,
right.
a kid didn't get a bloody nose, you know, maybe a concussion on his own. And I can't remember who broke it up, but yeah, that was a if you wanna find that episode, it's called "Delete the Evidence." Blame the
Okay,
victim.
sure.
I'm not laughing
And
at
a
the
lot,
kids' luck, I'm just laughing at how stupid it's just sounded because the schools are
right.
just covering themselves up.
Well, of course, and that's when you get lawyers involved. That's what happens because the lawyer, unfortunately, in this country, we don't care about the truth anymore. It's about who wins and who loses,
Mhm.
and that's pretty much where lawyers come in. But yeah, as far as deleting the evidence, that's just ridiculous. And I think a lot of times the bullying, it's passed down from the parents to the kids.
Yeah.
You know, the dads come from this macho, men don't cry background, and they teach the kids the same thing. And if a kid's different, they teach their son because it's typically males that do the bullying, even though women can be really vicious too. And they teach the hatred, and the indifference. And that's one of the things we've got to change in this country is because that's what makes this country great is the versatility that we have with people in this country.
Yes. And I know schools when we talk about bullying prevention, schools can only do so much. If you're a parent, it's still your child. You gotta be responsible for your own child. You gotta teach them this is how we treat people.
Right.
We also gotta be
Exactly.
careful what we say around our kids too. If we say we hate this person because he likes this person for president, whatever, we can't say that to our kids because
Right.
they don't know any difference.
I agree. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm glad with like the Atlanta shooting that just happened, they're holding the father accountable
Yes.
because he bought the weapon for his son, knowing that his son had made threats against that school. So it's no longer, the parents not being held responsible because that is your child. You are responsible for what your child does.
Anything else you're doing to help spread Joe's message?
If they ask when I'm in town, because it's on my website and people know, what I've done, I'm willing to go and talk to schools and let them know and talk about the message. One of the best things I've ever heard is a teacher gave a brand new 8.5 by 11 blank sheet of paper to all her students. And she told them to crumple it up, stomp on it, crumple it up, do whatever you want to do, but don't rip it. And then she asked him to unfold it and try and make it as smooth as possible. And of course, no one could make it totally the way it was.
Yeah.
And she told the kid, she said, that is what happens when you bully somebody. They may recover, but there's scars that are going to be left for the rest of their life, mentally and physically. So she used that to try and get the point across that it's not something that just kids do. The other thing is I have kids, uh, or I talk to kids because I'm looked up to because I've got television credits, radio, movies and stuff. So I'm looked at as a cool guy, because I'm a comedian and everything. But I try and at my shows take in the parents who come up to me and talk to me about that because I do make fun of various groups of people, but I don't do it in an attacking way. I do it in
Yeah.
a comical way because I make fun of myself too. I do self-deprecating humor just to show that everybody we should laugh at ourselves. This country is taking themselves way too serious now, and we need more laughter and less bullying and, like you said, less hatred. And unfortunately, without getting political in this political environment, it's a very negative, very volatile situation that's been created in this country.
Today's society, I feel, is giving you all the material that you need, and all you have to really do is just repeat what you saw. And
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, this is not a joke. This is actually true. It sounds silly, doesn't it?
right,
Um, I'm 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 doing some videos for my campaigning for school board, and it's really easy to pull off issues because when you look at how the school board talks about kids when they forget that they're being recorded, and we can look this up, you'd be shocked on what they say about kids these days. And if I would say that without the video evidence, they'll think I'm crazy. But what I do in my videos, I just let them say it and I give them my opinion. And then I know I got one board member really upset at me, but I'm like, well, you should be upset at your group. You guys are the ones talking about this. I'm just
right,
I'm just repurposing the video. I went to the
right.
website, I clicked download, and I just threw it back out there. Um,
It's don't kill the messenger,
it's just crazy. And plus with comedy, you're right. There are some uptight people, but if you're gonna be one of those uptight people, don't go see a comedy show. I'll
exactly,
see it because
exactly.
everyone gets made fun of, and that's kind of why you attend comedy shows. It's fun, bullying is different. Bullying is meant to cause harm. It's okay.
Correct.
Comedy, you pay to go see this. Um, if you get picked on, well, first of all, be happy that you got recognized by that comedian. At least they're paying attention to you. But it's like you're,
Well, what I
you're
tell people is no one has ever left a comedy show and said, "Oh, let's go kick somebody's butt because he made
exactly.
fun of them." So they've never done that. We all, you even look at the old 70s and 80s movies like Blazing Saddles and different things like that. Everybody made fun of everybody
Oh,
and we just
Mel
laughed.
Brooks. Mel
Oh, he
Brooks.
was the master.
You know, would he get canceled today for his movies? You wonder
Absolutely.
how much. Like Blazing Saddles. I finally saw that movie like a few months ago, and I was like,
Yeah.
"There's no way this show would be able to work in
No.
today."
Even TV shows like All in the Family with Archie Bunker
Oh yes,
never be allowed on TV today.
yeah,
And they say we're making progress. I think we're going backwards actually, because like I said, what makes this country great is the diversity, and if
yeah.
I tell people this all the time, if your mind is closed, your eyes are blind. And if you go to a comedy show, if you don't like one of my jokes, wait for the next one. Maybe the next one you'll like. But I actually got, oh God, what are they again? The, the crazy radical, group of Christians or whatever, that the ones that protest the soldiers' funerals and all that.
Oh, the Westboro Baptist
Westboro
Church.
Baptist Church.
Yes.
I got called out by name because according to them, I used blasphemy about the Bible because I had this joke that Colorado, the same year they legalized marijuana for medical purposes, they also legalized gay marriage. And so I have this joke that Colorado finally interpreted the Bible correctly because the Bible says if a man shall lie with a man, he shall be stoned. And
Oh, jeez.
so, so it was just a play on words and stuff, but they called me a messenger of Satan because I support the troops. I do a lot of shows for the troops, and because I was a blasphemy. And I thought that was hilarious. And just like you said, I was honored that they called me out by name. It was like a
Yeah.
badge of honor.
So, Gio, what type of comedy do you do?
I do everything from relationship stuff. I hit on some political issues. I hit on mainly just topics of today. I do jokes about the trans community, the LGBTQ community, but I do it in such a way to where I've actually had them come up to me and be like, you know what? I wanted to be mad at you, but that was so funny. I love that joke. I tell one joke to where I'm not homophobic. I'm just fire retardant, and things like that. And it's just I hit everybody. There's nobody I don't hit. I hit myself. I do self-deprecating humor about myself, very much so. Like I do a thing about how I'm not in the best of shape, and I know that my only shot at a smoking hot body is probably cremation. That's one of my jokes. So I hit myself. I hit everybody. I make everybody feel comfortable. I've been compared to Anthony Jeselnik, and I've been compared to Greg Giraldo, the
Okay.
same type of humor.
Yep.
So it's the same type of thing. I don't attack anybody. It's fun. You know, I say things that a lot of comedians today are afraid to say because of the cancel community.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they can't. They're trying to cancel Eminem right now, which is funny because if kids these days heard Johnny Cash, what he would sing about, I'm like, dude, Eminem must listen to Johnny Cash because Johnny Cash, I think, should be canceled for the stuff that he
Yeah.
would say.
Well, like my website is inappropriategenius.com. That's my website.
That's
And
an
I had
awesome
a
name.
I had a critic call me that. But then I saw a picture on YouTube or on Facebook I thought was great. They're like, if you're offended by today's comedians, let me introduce you to George Carlin, Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor. These are the comedians we grew up with. And so the comedians today don't even hold a candle to those guys. Andrew
Yeah.
Dice Clay, remember all the
Oh gosh, I think he's been kicked off of every live
everything.
show, whatever. I think MTV kicked him off.
Yeah, they banned him
Yeah.
for doing what they know he did, you know? And the fact they're going to, Eminem, you can try and cancel Eminem all you want, but he's such a huge money earner and a huge name, he'll never go anywhere. You
Yep.
know, as a matter of fact, um, you remember Dee Snider from Twisted Sister?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah, he's a buddy of mine. And we were talking one day, and I don't know if you remember, he went and testified in front of Congress when they were trying to put the parental advisory stickers on everything.
Oh really?
And yeah, he told Al Gore, he said, I wish you all the luck in the world. He said, because the tougher you make it for a kid to get my album, the more they're going to want it and the more I'm going to sell. And that's actually a good point. You know, how
Yep.
many times you tell a kid you can't do this, they're going to do it.
Exactly. They always do the opposite. I mean, parents know that.
Absolutely.
Parents, I
Yeah.
know that with my kids.
You got to start using that reverse psychology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up here, Gio, if you had advice for any parent that kind of going through what Joe Bell went through, they have a kid who's different, schools are not listening. What advice would you have for that parent?
First of all, I would say, like Joe did, talk to your child, let them know it's okay, let them know that they did nothing wrong, that it's society's issue, but mainly let them know that anything that is going on, they can come to you and you'll support them no matter what it is, because these things can happen. And if they think like, sometimes kids think, well, my mom's not going to love me anymore because I'm this or I'm that. Talk to them and let them know it's okay. I talked to one mom who she thought her son was gay. Turns out he was, but he was afraid because he wanted to play football because dad was pushing him to play football. And I told her, I said, just sit down and talk to him, you know, and she did. And she sat down and she goes, you know, if you like boys and you don't like girls, she's trying to put it in a kid's way. She's like, that's okay. That's just the way you are. And being who you are, there's nothing wrong with it. And that's the point they got to get across. They should be proud of who they are. And that's just, and then if they, the other thing is if your kids are witnessing this in their schools, to say something.
Yeah.
You know, if you see something, say something. Don't be afraid and don't give in to peer pressure. It's wrong. You know it's wrong. You have to say something.
And Gio, I know you said this a little bit ago, but one more time, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they find you?
They can go to inappropriategenius.com. There's a contact Geo at the bottom, and that's an email that will go directly to me. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. They can also email me directly it's geo at rebelstudiostv.com. That's the production company that handles all my live shows, and that will get directly to me as well.
Awesome. If you're listening on audio, just click the description on the podcast. Otherwise, if you're on YouTube, you obviously just saw it go across your screen. Gio, thank you so much for giving us more insights to Joe Bell.
Thank you.
Great movie, a hard movie to watch, but very well done.
Yeah, it was, and for Mark Wahlberg to want to step up and do that movie was huge.
Yes.
You know, I remember when Lola, Joe's widow, gave me the call and said, I just got a call from Mark Wahlberg. I said, what?
How awesome
And
was
she
that?
said, yeah. She said, yeah, he wants to do a movie about Joe. And it's like, oh my God, you know, finally we're going to get some mainstream attention for this.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I highly recommend you watch the film. It's an amazing, it's a tearjerker, but it's an amazing film.
Yes. The whole movie, I'm not going to give it too much away, but I was a little shocked at the very end.
Yeah.
Not the death of Joe Bell, but just how the movie was set up. Like, well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. Joe, the night before he was killed, was actually at my house for dinner.
Really?
Yeah, we had played pool because he had the day off and he wanted to relax before he started walking again. And we shot pool in my basement. We had my girlfriend at the time went out and got Chipotle, and we had dinner and we relaxed. And then I got a call from him the night before he was killed, and he would camp under overpasses, and it happened to be snowing that night. And I said, "Hey Joe, I'll come get you, and then I'll bring you back." And he's like, "No, no, I'm fine. I'm okay under here." I said, "Okay." And then the next morning, I got the call from Jaden's niece, and she told me what happened.
Yeah.
So
very sad. Well,
yeah,
Gio, again, thank you so much for reaching out to me and coming on this podcast.
my pleasure. And thank you for what you're doing and getting the word out. That's awesome.
Yes, thank you. I try my best. All I can
Good.
do.
That's all you can do.
And for myself, you can always find us at our very own website, which is www.breakingbullying.com. You can also reach out to us at our email address. If you have a story of your own bullying to share, or for whatever reason you want to get a hold of us, our email address is breakbullyinghere@gmail.com. Now, if you're a victim of bullying and you don't know where to turn, there is online resources to help you. The first is the government's very own anti-bullying website, and the address is www.stopbullying.gov. And other online resource is www.pacer.org/bullying. Now, if you have had thoughts of suicide or of self-harm, we implore you to stop. Reach out to the National Suicide Hotline. That number is very simple. It's 988. I'm Tim Flynn, and thank you for listening, and we will be back next week to continue the conversation to break the silence on bullying.